June 19, 1944, 0847 hours, 15,000 feet above the Philippine Sea. The Grumman F6F Hellcat fighters that had climbed into formation that morning carried modifications that would fundamentally transform aerial combat in the Pacific. American pilots called them the aluminum tanks. The Japanese would soon have another name for them, Shino Tsubasa, Wings of Death. These career-based fighters, with their innovative combat systems and devastating firepower, would shatter the myth of zero invincibility in a single afternoon of combat that naval historians would later call the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. What followed was not just a tactical victory, but a complete psychological collapse of Japanese naval aviation dominance that had ruled Pacific skies since Pearl Harbor. The Japanese defensive transformation had begun after their Pyrrhic victory at the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1943. Vice Admiral Jusaburo Osawa, commanding the first mobile fleet, had studied every American carrier engagement since Midway. He reached what seemed like an unshakable conclusion based on 3 years of combat data. The Mitsubishi A6M0 remained superior in maneuverability, and Japanese pilot skill would continue to dominate any engagement. In his flagship command center aboard the carrier Taiho, Osawa had drafted Tactical Directive No. 7 on May 15, 1944. Our Zero squadrons shall engage enemy fighters at close range where superior maneuverability ensures victory. American fighters are heavy and slow. We shall use this against them. Victory belongs to the agile. The mathematics of aerial combat had appeared unchangeable. At the Battle of Coral Sea, Zero fighters had achieved a 3-to-1 kill ratio. At the Eastern Solomons, Japanese pilots had demonstrated their superior dogfighting capability against the earlier F4F Wildcats. The Zero's legendary turn radius of just 16 meters at combat speed made it nearly impossible to outmaneuver in traditional dogfighting. But the Americans had been studying too. At the Naval Air Station Patuxent River in Maryland, combat analysis teams had been examining every engagement report, every gun camera footage, every pilot debriefing since 1942. They reached a revolutionary conclusion that would reshape American fighter design. You don't beat the Zero by trying to outturn it. You beat it by refusing to fight on its terms. The weapon that would break Japanese air superiority had been born from desperation in the Guadalcanal campaign 18 months earlier. On August 7, 1942, Marine and Navy pilots flying F4F Wildcats had encountered Zero squadrons that could literally fly circles around them. The solution came through collaboration between Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corporation and the Navy's Bureau of Aeronautics. According to official Navy Department records, design teams at Grumman's Bethpage facility began developing a fighter specifically engineered to counter the Zero's advantages. The technical designation was F6F3 Hellcat, designed specifically for Pacific carrier operations against Japanese fighters. The technical specifications documented in Bureau of Aeronautics records revealed the revolutionary nature of the aircraft. The Hellcat featured a Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine, producing 2,000 horsepower, nearly double the Zero's 1,130 horsepower Nakajima Sakai engine. The aircraft weighed 15,413 pounds fully loaded, compared to the Zero's 6,164 pounds. Where the Zero prioritized agility through lightness, the Hellcat chose power and protection. The armor protection told the story. Pilot armor plating of 212 pounds, self-sealing fuel tanks holding 250 gallons, bulletproof windscreen of 3-inch laminated glass. The Zero, by contrast, carried no pilot armor and no self-sealing tanks, design choices that had once seemed justified by superior maneuverability but now became fatal vulnerabilities. Armament specifications showed American firepower philosophy. 6 Browning M2.50 caliber machine guns with 400 rounds per gun, 2,400 rounds total of armor-piercing and incendiary ammunition. The Zero carried 2 7.7mm machine guns and 2 20mm cannons with limited ammunition. In a sustained engagement, the Hellcat could pour 10 times the metal into the air. Initial trials at Naval Air Station Anacostia in March 1943 demonstrated performance that shocked even the test pilots. Maximum speed of 380 miles per hour at 23,400 feet, 60 miles per hour faster than the Zero. Rate of climb 3,500 feet per minute. Combat ceiling 37,300 feet. The Hellcat could climb faster, fly higher, and dive away from any engagement at will. But speed and power meant nothing without tactics. The breakthrough came from Commander John Jimmy Thatch, who had developed the Thatch-Weave defensive maneuver. Now, with the Hellcat's capabilities, Navy tacticians developed offensive doctrine that would prove devastating. Never dogfight the Zero, use superior speed and power for boom and zoom attacks, maintain altitude advantage, use teamwork over individual heroics, and exploit the Zero's lack of armor with concentrated firepower. Training squadrons at Naval Air Station Puenane in Hawaii drilled these tactics relentlessly. Pilots learned to resist the temptation to turn with Zeros. They practiced high-speed diving attacks, firing bursts, and climbing away before Japanese pilots could react. They trained in pairs and divisions, covering each other, creating overlapping fields of fire that turned individual dogfights into coordinated executions. The psychological preparation was equally important. Fighter direction officer training taught pilots to trust their aircraft's advantages. Your Hellcat is tougher, faster, and better armed, instructors hammered home. Don't fight their fight, make them fight yours. By June 1944, 15 carrier air groups had transitioned to Hellcats. Over 2,500 pilots had completed the new tactical training. The aircraft that would meet Japanese forces in the Philippine Sea represented not just new technology, but a complete reimagining of naval fighter combat. The stage was set for the largest carrier battle in history. Vice Admiral Osawa's first mobile fleet deployed 430 aircraft, predominantly A6M Zeros operating on tactics and assumptions forged in earlier victories. They expected to face improved American fighters, but anticipated familiar combat, turning dogfights where Japanese skill and Zero agility would prevail. They had no concept of what was coming. The F6F Hellcat wasn't just a better fighter, it was a completely different approach to aerial warfare designed specifically to negate every advantage the Zero possessed. The Japanese were preparing for the battle they knew how to fight. The Americans were bringing a battle the Japanese had never imagined.
June 19, 1944. D-Day of Operation Forager. 08:23 hours. The first combat deployment of massed Hellcat squadrons occurred 200 miles west of Guam. Japanese scout planes had located Task Force 58, and Vice Admiral Ozawa had launched his first strike wave, 69 aircraft, predominantly Zeros, with orders to destroy American carriers using proven tactics that had worked since 1941. According to Air Group 15's action reports, radar operators aboard USS Lexington detected the incoming raid at 09:59 hours, range 150 miles. Fighter direction officers began vectoring Hellcat combat air patrols toward the threat. Lieutenant Commander David McCampbell, commanding Fighting Squadron 15, received the intercept course at 10:07 hours. His division of 4 Hellcats turned west, climbing to 25,000 feet, 5,000 feet above the approaching Japanese formation. Official after-action reports described what happened next with clinical precision. Hellcat divisions executed vertical attacks from superior altitude. Enemy fighters attempted to engage in turning combat. Our pilots maintained energy advantage, refusing horizontal maneuvering. Results: 42 enemy aircraft destroyed, 3 Hellcats damaged, 0 Hellcats lost. The numbers told only part of the story. Japanese pilots encountering Hellcats in force for the first time attempted their standard tactics, tight turns to get on the Americans' tail, using the Zero's superior turn radius to gain firing position. But the Hellcats weren't there to turn. McCampbell's after-action report noted, "We dove through their formation at 450 miles per hour, fired concentrated bursts, then climbed back to altitude using our superior power. The Zeros couldn't follow our climb rate. Those that tried to pursue stalled out and became easy targets for our covering division. The tactical revolution was complete. Every assumption Japanese pilots held about fighter combat had become a liability. Their light weight meant American .50 caliber rounds tore through their aircraft. Their lack of armor meant pilot casualties from hits that Hellcat pilots would survive. Their limited ammunition meant they couldn't afford extended engagements, while Hellcats could make multiple attack runs. The physics of destruction became apparent in gun camera footage analyzed post-battle. The Hellcat's 6.50 caliber guns, converging at 300 yards, created a cone of destruction that could saw a Zero in half. Armor-piercing incendiary rounds would penetrate the Zero's fuel tanks. Without self-sealing technology, a single tracer hit often meant catastrophic fire. Combat operations drove immediate tactical refinements documented by squadron intelligence officers. Initial attacks confirmed the boom and zoom tactics were devastatingly effective, but pilots discovered additional advantages. The Hellcat's superior roll rate at high speed allowed rapid position changes that Zeros couldn't match. The rugged construction meant Hellcats could absorb battle damage and return to carriers. One VF-16 Hellcat landed with 72 bullet and cannon holes. At 11:07 hours, Ozawa launched his second strike, 130 aircraft, the largest single formation. This wave included his most experienced pilots, veterans of Pearl Harbor and the Indian Ocean raids. They expected to overwhelm American defenses through sheer numbers. Instead, they flew into a carefully orchestrated aerial ambush. Task Force 58's fighter direction had evolved into a science. Radar tracking identified formations 100 miles out. Fighter direction officers stacked Hellcat divisions at different altitudes, high cover at 27,000 feet, middle intercept at 20,000 feet, low patrol at 15,000 feet. The Japanese formation, climbing to attack altitude, flew into a three-dimensional killing zone. Lieutenant Alexander Vrossiu, flying from USS Lexington, described the engagement in his combat report. Tally-ho at 11:32 hours, 50-plus bandits, Angels 18, executed overhead attack with division, selected Zero lagging formation, diving attack 500 miles per hour indicated, observed strikes on wings and fuselage, aircraft exploded, pulled up for altitude, second attack on different target, repeated 6 times, splashed 6 confirmed in 8 minutes, never turned with them once, just boom and zoom. Boom and zoom. Vrossiu's 6 victories in one engagement would become legendary, but he was one of dozens performing similar execution. VF-2, VF-8, VF-16, VF-24, every Hellcat squadron was racking up unprecedented scores. The Japanese formation disintegrated not through overwhelming force, but through systematic destruction. American pilots were hunting, not fighting. Radio intercepts decoded by Fleet Radio Unit Pacific documented Japanese command communications, revealing their complete tactical bewilderment. 11:47 hours, enemy fighters refuse close combat, request tactics guidance. 12:03 hours, American fighters climbing away from our pursuit, unable to engage. 12:15 hours, heavy losses, enemy using unknown tactics, need immediate support. 12:28 hours, formation breaking, cannot maintain cohesion under vertical attacks. The third Japanese strike wave, 47 aircraft, launched at 1300 hours. By this time, Ozawa's staff had begun to comprehend they were facing something fundamentally different. Flight leaders received modified instructions: avoid vertical combat, maintain tight formations, target bombers, not fighters. These adaptations came too late and proved futile. Hellcat squadrons had refined their tactics with each engagement. They now operated in coordinated divisions of 4 with mutual support protocols that made them nearly impossible to isolate. When Zeros tried to ignore the fighters and attack the bombers, the Hellcats simply destroyed them from behind. The Zero's lack of rear armor made tail attacks suicidal to ignore.
By 1400 hours, the tactical situation had evolved from battle to massacre. Ozawa's fourth strike wave, 82 aircraft, represented his final offensive capability. Japanese pilots climbing toward the American fleet carried fuel for barely 2 hours of flight, enough to reach the target, fight briefly, and return. What they didn't know was that their carrier coordinates, transmitted in the clear due to communication breakdowns, had been intercepted. American submarines were already moving into position. The engagement that followed demonstrated how completely the Hellcat had revolutionized carrier warfare. Fighting Squadron 27, led by Lieutenant Commander Ernest Wood, intercepted the formation at 14:23 hours. Wood's tactical innovation became doctrine within hours, the mowing machine pattern. His 12 Hellcats formed a horizontal line at 24,000 feet, then dove simultaneously through the Japanese formation in a coordinated sweep. The concentrated firepower from 72 machine guns created an impassable wall of lead. Wood's combat report captured the execution with stark clarity. Formation dove line abreast at 14:25 hours, each pilot assigned sector of enemy formation. Firing commenced at 800 yards, ceased at 300 yards. Observed 16 enemy aircraft destroyed or critically damaged in single pass. Reformed at altitude, repeated attack pattern. Enemy formation completely disrupted. No effective return fire experienced. The Japanese perspective, documented through post-war interrogations by the United States Strategic Bombing Survey, revealed pilots completely unprepared for this form of warfare. Lieutenant Hideaki Nakajima, one of the few survivors from the fourth wave, testified, "We train for individual combat, one pilot against one pilot, skill against skill. The Americans fought as machines, in perfect coordination. When they attacked, the sky filled with tracers from every direction. There was no dodging, no maneuvering, just fire everywhere. Our tactics meant nothing." The psychological impact exceeded physical destruction. For the first time in the Pacific War, Japanese naval aviators broke formation and fled before reaching their targets. Radio intercepts documented commanders ordering retreats, an action previously unthinkable in Japanese naval aviation doctrine. The Bushido Code that sustained pilots through Midway and Coral Sea shattered against a form of combat that rendered individual courage irrelevant. June 19, 1944, 15:07 hours. The day's Butcher's Bill revealed the extent of the transformation. According to official U.S. Navy tabulations, Japanese aircraft launched 373, Japanese aircraft returning to carriers 130. American aircraft lost to Japanese fighters, 23. Japanese pilots killed or missing, 243. But numbers alone didn't capture the qualitative shift. Japan had lost not just aircraft, but irreplaceable veteran pilots, men with thousands of hours of combat experience, instructors who trained new aviators, squadron leaders who held units together. The Hellcat hadn't just won a battle, it had destroyed the institutional knowledge of Japanese naval aviation. Vice Admiral Mark Mitzer, commanding Task Force 58, documented the strategic implications in his action report. Enemy air capability effectively neutralized. Fighter opposition negligible going forward. The F6F Hellcat has proven decisively superior to all Japanese fighter types. Recommend maximum Hellcat production and deployment. The evening of June 19th saw American submarines exploit the chaos. USS Albacore torpedoed the carrier Taiho, Ozawa's flagship. USS Kavala sank the carrier Shokaku. The combination of aerial defeat and submarine attack destroyed Japan's first mobile fleet as an offensive force. 2 fleet carriers gone, aircraft strength reduced by 2/3, pilot casualties catastrophic. Japanese naval aviation would never recover. The Philippines, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, every subsequent battle saw Hellcats dominating skies with increasing ease. The kill ratio that emerged from June 19th held steady throughout the war. For every Hellcat lost to Japanese fighters, 19 Japanese aircraft were destroyed.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Combat operations drove continuous improvements on Hellcats. Field modifications included upgraded engines, improved gun sight systems, and enhanced radio equipment. The F6F5 variant, introduced in early 1945, featured a 2,200 horsepower engine and provisions for rockets and bombs, transforming the fighter into a multi-role platform. Marine Corps squadrons adopted Hellcats for land-based operations. VMF-213, VMF-214, VMF-221, the famous Black Sheep, Squashbucklers, and Fighting Falcons, all transitioned to Hellcats and continued the slaughter. From Henderson Field, from Peleliu, from captured Japanese airfields, Hellcats hunted Zeros wherever they appeared. The tactics evolved, but the fundamental principle remained. Refuse the turning fight, use superior power and protection, coordinate attacks, exploit Japanese vulnerabilities. Every engagement validated the design philosophy. Every battle proved that the age of the lightweight, maneuverable fighter had ended. Modern aerial combat belonged to aircraft that could absorb punishment and dish out devastating firepower. By war's end, operational statistics told the complete story. Total Hellcat production, 12,275 aircraft. Total aerial victories credited to Hellcats, 5,223. Total Hellcats lost to enemy aircraft, 270. The math was simple and brutal. 19.3 to 1 kill ratio. No other fighter in any Air Force in any theater approached this record. The Hellcat hadn't just defeated the Zero, it had made the Zero's entire design philosophy obsolete.
The lessons from the Philippine Sea were immediately applied across the Pacific theater. On August 15, 1944, carrier air groups supporting the Palau Islands invasion demonstrated refined Hellcat tactics. Fighting Squadron 12, operating from USS Randolph, documented what they termed vertical supremacy doctrine, maintaining altitude advantage so absolute that Japanese fighters couldn't reach attack altitude before being intercepted. Lieutenant Raymond Davis, leading a division from VF-12, recorded the tactical evolution in his after-action report. Maintained cap station at 28,000 feet. Radar vectored to bogies at 0947 hours. Located 16 Zeros climbing through 18,000 feet. Executed split-S attack from 10,000 feet above, diving to 500 miles per hour. Selected targets in trail, fired 2-second bursts at 400 yards. Observed 4 Zeros destroyed before reaching 15,000 feet. Climbed back to station altitude. Total engagement time, 4 minutes. Ammunition expended, 180 rounds. The efficiency was staggering. Davis had destroyed 4 enemy fighters using less than 8% of his ammunition in an engagement where the enemy never had an opportunity to return fire. This wasn't combat, it was systematic execution using superior technology and tactics. Japanese defensive adaptations, documented in captured tactical manuals, showed desperate attempts to counter Hellcat advantages. New directives ordered Zeros to operate at maximum altitude, to maintain formation integrity, to avoid pursuing diving American fighters. But these instructions merely delayed the inevitable. The Hellcat's performance envelope encompassed every altitude, every speed regime. There was nowhere Japanese fighters could operate without disadvantage. The Battle of Leyte Gulf in October 1944 demonstrated the final evolution of Hellcat dominance. Commander David McCampbell, now CAG-15 aboard USS Essex, achieved what remains the U.S. Navy's single greatest aerial combat performance. On October 24, 1944, McCampbell and his wingman encountered 60 Japanese aircraft, a mixed formation of Zeros, Oscars, and Judys, attempting to attack the American fleet. McCampbell's combat report, filed at 16:30 hours, defied belief. Intercepted large enemy formation at 13:17 hours, executed repeated boom and zoom attacks over 90-minute engagement. Splashed 9 confirmed, my wingman splashed 6. Enemy formation broke and fled. Ammunition exhausted. Fuel critical. Returned to carrier at 14:48 hours. Against impossible odds, 2 Hellcat pilots had destroyed 15 enemy aircraft and scattered the rest. The engagement showcased everything the Hellcat represented:
superior speed for repeated attacks, rugged construction to survive return fire, massive ammunition capacity for extended engagement, and engine reliability to bring pilots home on fumes. The psychological dimension became central to understanding Hellcat effectiveness. Navy psychiatrists attached to carrier groups documented that Japanese pilots increasingly showed signs of combat fatigue and demoralization. Interrogations of prisoners revealed many had stopped believing they could survive encounters with Hellcats. One captured pilot, Lieutenant Saburno Kirahata, provided testimony that illuminated Japanese pilot psychology. "We knew before takeoff that meeting Hellcats meant death. The Americans had aircraft that could do everything better: climb faster, dive faster, absorb damage, deliver overwhelming firepower. Our only advantage was maneuverability, but they refused to fight where we were strong. It was like being armed with a sword while the enemy had rifles." The industrial dimensions separated American capability from Japanese desperation. By late 1944, Grumman's production facilities were delivering 500 Hellcats per month. Pilot training pipelines produced replacement aviators faster than combat losses occurred. Carriers deployed with spare aircraft. Damaged Hellcats were repaired or replaced immediately. Japan, by contrast, struggled to replace losses. Zero production peaked at 240 per month in 1944, but quality declined as skilled workers were drafted. Pilot training time shortened from 700 hours to 200 hours as fuel shortages curtailed flight training. Replacement pilots arrived at frontline units with minimal preparation, often with less than 100 hours in type. The mathematics became inevitable. American pilots averaged 300 combat hours in Hellcats before completing tours. Japanese pilots averaged 30 hours before being killed. Experience multiplied technological advantage. By early 1945, average American fighter pilots had more flight time than Japanese instructors. Marine Hellcat squadrons demonstrated the aircraft's versatility in different operational contexts. VMF 218, the Hellhawks, operating from Majuro Atoll, developed ground attack tactics using the Hellcat's robust airframe. They discovered the aircraft could carry 2,000 pounds of bombs or 6 5-inch rockets while retaining air superiority capability. The F6F F9 night fighter variant, introduced in late 1944, extended American dominance into darkness. Equipped with radar and trained night fighter crews, these specialized Hellcats hunted Japanese aircraft attempting nocturnal attacks. VFN-76 and VFN-77 pioneered tactics that made nighttime as dangerous for Japanese aircraft as daylight. By February 1945, Japanese naval aviation existed only as scattered remnants. The once proud Zero squadrons that had dominated Pacific skies in 1942 had been systematically destroyed. The Hellcat hadn't just won air superiority, it had achieved air supremacy, so complete that Japanese aircraft rarely challenged American operations.
The Battle of Okinawa, beginning April 1, 1945, represented the Hellcat's final demonstration of total aerial dominance. Japanese forces, desperate to slow the American advance, launched Operation 10 Go, massive kamikaze attacks using every available aircraft. The Japanese High Command believed suicide tactics might succeed where conventional combat had failed. They were wrong. The Hellcat proved equally devastating against kamikaze aircraft as it had against conventional fighters. Combat air patrol procedures refined over 3 years of combat created layered defenses that kamikazes could rarely penetrate. Vice Admiral Richmond Turner, commanding amphibious forces at Okinawa, documented the defensive system. Fighter director officers maintained continuous radar surveillance. Hellcat CAP stationed at 30, 20, and 10,000 feet. All inbound raids intercepted minimum 50 miles from fleet. Coordination between radar, fighter direction, and CAP aircraft has achieved 90% interception rate. The April 6 kamikaze attack, the largest of the war with 355 Japanese aircraft, demonstrated the system's effectiveness. Fighting squadrons from 10 carriers intercepted the raid in waves. VF-9 from USS Yorktown splashed 21 kamikazes before they reached the picket line. VF-17 from USS Hornet destroyed 18. VF-30 from USS Belleauwood accounted for 15. Lieutenant Howard Finn, flying CAP that day, described the clinical efficiency.
Radar vectored us to a huge formation at 09:23 hours. We could see them from 20 miles. Looked like a swarm of bees. We dove through them, each pilot selecting targets. The kamikazes flew straight and level, no defensive maneuvering. It was target practice. I splashed 4 in one pass. Of 355 Japanese aircraft launched, only 22 reached the fleet. The Hellcat defensive screen had destroyed over 90% before they posed any threat. This performance repeated throughout the Okinawa campaign. Thousands of kamikaze aircraft launched, the vast majority destroyed by Hellcat CAPs. Japanese sources, documented through post-war strategic bombing survey interviews, revealed the despair of kamikaze pilots. These men, often barely trained teenagers with 50 hours total flight time, faced Hellcat pilots with hundreds of combat hours. The outcome was predetermined. One kamikaze pilot, Ensign Hachiro Miyashita, survived his mission. His engine failed on approach, and he ditched, becoming a prisoner. His testimony provided haunting insight. We were told the American fighters would be too busy to stop us all, that our numbers would overwhelm them. It was a lie. The Hellcats were everywhere, at every altitude. They shot down my squadron mates like they were training targets. I was almost grateful when my engine failed. Better to be captured than face those guns. The technical evolution of Hellcat tactics continued even in the war's final months. Squadron commanders developed what they called the grinder, a rotating CAP system where fresh divisions relieved on-station aircraft every 30 minutes. This maintained constant coverage with alert, well-armed fighters. No raid could time attacks to catch depleted or fatigued CAP. The F6F-5 variant's improved performance provided additional advantages. The 2,200 horsepower R2800 engine delivered 390 mph maximum speed and 3,700 feet per minute climb rate. Japanese aircraft, increasingly obsolete and poorly maintained, couldn't match these numbers. By May 1945, Japanese air attacks on Okinawa had virtually ceased. The Hellcat defensive screen had destroyed over 3,000 Japanese aircraft during the campaign. American fighter losses to enemy action, 78 aircraft. The kill ratio had actually improved, 38-1. Marine Corps aviation documentation showed similar dominance from land bases. VMF 323, the Death Rattlers, operating from Kadena Airfield, achieved 124 aerial victories in April alone. Their Hellcats, flying from captured Japanese runways, provided close air support while maintaining air superiority, the ultimate demonstration of the aircraft's versatility. The ground attack role evolved significantly. Hellcats delivered napalm, rockets, and bombs with precision that earlier fighters couldn't match. The robust airframe absorbed ground fire that would have destroyed lighter aircraft. Pilots reported flying missions with battle damage that would have been fatal in zeros, returning to base with cylinders shot out, control surfaces damaged, hydraulics failed. Lieutenant Colonel John Dobbin, commanding MAG 31, wrote in his operations summary, "The F6F has proven the ideal Pacific fighter. Air superiority, ground attack, reconnaissance, it excels in every role. Maintenance crews love it. Simple, rugged, repairable under field conditions. Pilots trust it completely. The aircraft has changed how we think about carrier aviation." The final tabulation of Hellcat performance, compiled by Navy Department analysts in June 1945, revealed statistics that would define naval aviation for generations. Total sorties flown, over 66,000. Aerial victories, 5,156 confirmed. Aircraft lost to enemy fighters, 270. Kill ratio, 19.1-1.
The strategic implications of Hellcat dominance extended far beyond tactical victories. Joint Chiefs of Staff documents from spring 1945 show how air superiority influenced invasion planning for Operation Downfall, the proposed assault on Japan's home islands. General Douglas MacArthur's planning staff, according to declassified documents,
calculated that Hellcat air supremacy would allow unprecedented close air support for invasion forces. Intelligence estimates projected Japanese kamikaze reserves of 5,000 aircraft for homeland defense, but planners expressed confidence that Hellcat caps could maintain the 90% interception rate achieved at Okinawa. Admiral Chester Nimitz, in his strategic assessment dated May 15, 1945, wrote, "The F6F6 Hellcat has fundamentally altered the naval warfare equation. We now possess air superiority so complete that Japanese air power cannot effectively contest our operations. This changes invasion calculations substantially. Ground forces can expect continuous air cover and interdiction support previously impossible." The psychological dimension of Hellcat dominance affected Japanese strategic thinking. Intercepted diplomatic cables, decoded through Operation Magic, revealed that Japanese leadership understood their air defenses had failed completely. Foreign Minister Shigenori Togo, in a June 1945 playbill to Ambassador Naotaki Sato, admitted, "American fighter superiority has made our airspace indefensible. Their Grumman fighters destroy our aircraft with impunity." British naval observers attached to Task Force 58 documented the Hellcat's impact in reports to the Admiralty. Captain Michael Fell, serving aboard USS Wasp, wrote, "The Americans have achieved what we thought impossible: complete negation of enemy air power through technological and tactical superiority. The F6F6 Hellcat represents a revolution in naval warfare that we must study carefully for our own Pacific operations." The industrial accomplishment behind Hellcat production deserved equal recognition. Grumman's Long Island facilities, according to company records, produced 12 275 Hellcats between June 1942 and November 1945. Peak production reached 605 aircraft in March 1945. This industrial achievement, combined with pilot training programs that produced skilled aviators faster than combat attrition, created sustainable dominance. Japanese industrial capacity, by contrast, collapsed under bombing and blockade. Zero production, which peaked at 240 per month in 1944, fell to fewer than 100 per month by mid-1945. Quality control deteriorated. Captured aircraft showed substandard materials, poor workmanship, and inadequate engines. The industrial war mirrored the aerial war. American production and quality overwhelmed Japanese capability. Technical intelligence teams examining captured Japanese aircraft documented the technological gap. An A6M-0 captured intact at Saipan underwent testing at Naval Air Station Anacostia. The evaluation report, dated August 1944, noted, "Subject aircraft demonstrates excellent maneuverability but catastrophic vulnerabilities. Lack of armor protection, non-self-sealing fuel tanks, and light construction make it extremely vulnerable to .50 caliber fire. One burst from a Hellcat's guns would be fatal." The report continued with a stark conclusion. The A6M-0's design philosophy, maximizing performance through minimal weight, made sense in 1940. In 1944, against heavily armed and armored fighters like the F6F6, it is suicidal. The Japanese have no counter to American firepower and protection. Pilot training documentation illustrated another decisive advantage. By 1945, American naval aviators received over 300 hours of flight training before reaching fleet squadrons, including extensive gunnery practice, tactical training, and carrier qualification. Japanese pilots, due to fuel shortages and instructor losses, received as little as 100 hours total flight time before combat assignments. The experience gap became unbridgeable. Veterans like McCampbell, with hundreds of combat hours and dozens of victories, led squadrons against Japanese pilots who had never fired their guns in combat. The mathematical outcome was inevitable. The experienced, well-trained American pilots in superior aircraft could not be defeated by undertrained Japanese pilots in obsolete fighters. Medical records from fleet hospital ships documented the different nature of casualties. American fighter pilot losses came primarily from anti-aircraft fire, operational accidents, or kamikaze attacks, rarely from enemy fighters. Japanese pilot casualties, according to captured medical records, showed the opposite pattern. Most died in aerial combat, specifically from .50 caliber gunfire. The strategic bombing campaign against Japan demonstrated another Hellcat capability: escort duty. When B-29 superfortresses began flying from Iwo Jima to attack Japanese cities, Hellcat escorts from nearby carriers provided fighter cover. The combination proved devastatingly effective. Japanese interceptors attempting to attack the bombers were destroyed by Hellcat escorts, allowing bombing missions to proceed unmolested. Lieutenant William Hardy, flying escort missions in May 1945, recorded, "Our job was to keep Japanese fighters away from the B-29s. We'd patrol above and ahead of the bomber stream. Any Japanese fighters that appeared, we'd dive on them immediately. Most missions we never even saw enemy aircraft. They'd learned to avoid areas where Hellcats operated." By July 1945, American air superiority over Japan was absolute. Hellcats flew reconnaissance missions over Tokyo Bay, photographing invasion beaches for Operation Downfall. No Japanese fighters challenged them. The once proud Japanese naval aviation had been reduced to preserving a few aircraft for final kamikaze attacks everyone knew the Hellcats would largely destroy before they reached targets.
August 15, 1945, the day Japan announced surrender. Hellcat squadrons received stand-down orders while on combat air patrol stations. For pilots who had fought from the Philippine Sea to Okinawa, the sudden silence felt surreal. No more radar vectors to incoming raids. No more boom and zoom attacks. No more burning zeros spiraling into the Pacific. Lieutenant Robert Murray, flying cap from USS Shangri-La, recorded the moment in his personal log. "We were orbiting at 25,000 feet when the radio crackled with the message, 'All stations, hostilities have ceased.' I looked at my wingman, he looked at me. 3 years of war, just over." We flew back to the carrier in formation, nobody saying a word. The Hellcat had done its job. The final accounting of F6F Hellcat achievements, compiled by Naval Aviation History, revealed statistics that would define the aircraft's legend. Total F6F Hellcats produced, 12,275. Total combat sorties, 66,530. Aerial victories, 5,223, 56% of all U.S. Navy aerial victories. Aircraft lost in combat, 270 to enemy aircraft, 553 to all causes. Overall kill ratio, 19.1 to 1. Pilots who became aces in Hellcats, 307. These numbers represented more than tactical success. They demonstrated the decisive advantage of combining sound engineering, industrial capacity, and effective tactics. The Hellcat had achieved what seemed impossible in 1942, complete negation of Japanese air power. The human dimension emerged in post-war reunions and historical research. Japanese naval aviation veterans, interviewed decades later, spoke of the Hellcat with a mixture of respect and remembered terror. Captain Minoru Genda, who planned the Pearl Harbor attack, stated in a 1982 interview, "The Hellcat defeated us as surely as the atomic bombs. Our pilots, our tactics, our entire air strategy became obsolete when that aircraft appeared. We could not adapt fast enough." American veterans gathering at annual tailhook reunions shared a different perspective. For them, the Hellcat represented salvation, an aircraft tough enough to bring them home, powerful enough to defeat any opponent, reliable enough to trust with their lives.
Commander David McCampbell, the Navy's leading ace with 34 victories, all in Hellcats, reflected in his 1996 autobiography. The F6F was the fighter pilot's fighter. It did everything well: climbed, dove, turned adequately, absorbed damage, delivered devastating firepower. But more than that, it was forgiving. It brought young pilots home when they made mistakes. It gave us confidence. Flying a Hellcat, you knew you had the advantage before the fight started. The technological legacy influenced fighter design for decades. Post-war analysis by naval aviation engineers identified the Hellcat's key innovations: prioritizing pilot protection over maximum performance, designing for maintainability under field conditions, integrating massive firepower with adequate ammunition, and ensuring reliability through robust construction. These principles shaped subsequent naval fighters: the F-8F Bearcat, F-9F Panther, and eventually the jet-powered fighters of the Korean War and beyond. The philosophy that defeated the Zero, build fighters that can absorb punishment and deliver overwhelming firepower, remains central to American fighter design. The strategic lessons resonated beyond aviation. Military historians identified the Hellcat program as exemplifying successful weapons development. Clearly defined requirements based on combat analysis, sound engineering prioritizing effectiveness over sophistication, industrial capacity enabling mass production, and tactical doctrine optimized for the weapon's strengths. General Curtis LeMay, who commanded strategic bombing operations, wrote in his memoirs, "The Hellcat program showed how America wins wars. We analyzed the problem, engineered the solution, produced it in overwhelming numbers, and employed it with tactics that maximized its advantages. The Japanese never had a chance once we figured out the formula." International aviation historians recognize the F-6F as among history's most successful fighters. British historian Alfred Price noted, "The Hellcat achieved the highest victory-to-loss ratio of any fighter in World War II. More significantly, it achieved this while operating from carriers under the most demanding conditions imaginable. It was a weapon system perfectly matched to its operational environment." The few remaining airworthy F-6Fs, preserved by museums and private collectors, serve as flying monuments to the men who flew them and the war they helped win. At air shows, the distinctive sound of the R-2800 engine and the sight of that stubby, powerful fighter still evoke memories of a war fought across Pacific skies. The National Naval Aviation Museum at Pensacola displays a Hellcat in the markings of VF-15, McCampbell's squadron. The placard reads, "This aircraft type destroyed more enemy aircraft than any other Allied fighter. It achieved this while operating from the pitching decks of carriers, demonstrating that American industrial and technical capability could overcome any adversary." Today, military aviation students study Hellcat tactics as examples of sound operational art, identifying enemy weaknesses, developing platforms and tactics to exploit those weaknesses, and executing with disciplined coordination. The boom and zoom tactics, the layered cap system, the integration of radar and fighter direction all remain relevant to modern air combat. The final testament to the Hellcat's impact came from an unexpected source. In 1991, the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force invited American veterans to Japan for the 50th anniversary of Pearl Harbor. During the ceremonies, Japanese naval aviation veterans presented a memorial plaque honoring the aircraft that taught us the future of aerial combat. The inscription, in Japanese and English, read, "To the Grumman F6F Hellcat and the men who flew it. Your aircraft showed that modern warfare demands more than warrior spirit. It requires industrial might, technological innovation, and tactical wisdom. You taught us these lessons at terrible cost. We honor your achievement and mourn all who died in that learning." The Hellcat story represents more than aviation history. It demonstrates how nations at war adapt, innovate, and ultimately prevail through the combination of industrial capacity, technological excellence, and human courage. The transformation from June 1942, when the Zero dominated Pacific skies, to August 1945, when Hellcats ruled them completely, shows the decisive power of effective weapons matched with sound tactics. The streams of .5 caliber fire that reached across Pacific skies didn't just destroy Japanese aircraft, they destroyed illusions about the nature of modern industrial warfare. Japanese forces that prepared for combat based on pre-war assumptions found themselves facing an enemy who had analyzed their strengths, engineered counters, and deployed them with overwhelming effectiveness. The Hellcat saved thousands of American lives by achieving air superiority that made invasion and bombing campaigns possible with acceptable casualties. It also inflicted thousands of Japanese deaths through systematic destruction of their air forces. This duality, salvation for one side, catastrophe for the other, defines its legacy. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.